Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be going over all the books that I read this past week. It was a pretty good week for me, especially since I find it a little bit more difficult to find time to read nowadays, but I read 6 books this past week and I had 1 DNF. The first book I read is More Than Words by Mia Sheridan. I've been meaning to read this book forever, and it's just never happened. So I finally got it on audio, even though I do own a physical copy of it, and I listened to it on audio, and it was really great audio. I really did like it, but I think it's my least favorite Mia Sheridan that I've read so far. So I've only read Archer's Voice and Savaged, and both of those I really loved. Archer's Voice is like top tier romance for me. I loved it. It was just so freaking good. But More Than Words, it just didn't quite do it for me, and it was because of the characters and not necessarily the story. So you can kind of categorize this as second chance romance a little bit, because they did have a childhood crush on each other. The hero, Callan, and Jessica met whenever Jessica was young. She was just kind of exploring her neighborhood. I also found it really funny because it's just like the fact that she was allowed to just leave her house, not really tell anybody where she was going, and she went to a railroad, a train track, and she found an abandoned train car, and that's where she met Callan, this boy who looked like he got in a fight, and we quickly discover that his home life is pretty terrible. And she introduces him to music, and they have this friendship throughout childhood, and you can tell that Jessica considers Callan her prince. She refers to Callan as her prince even in present day as well, which I find that Jessica was written in such a naive way. Sometimes her thoughts were just very childlike in a way, and it was just the way that her thoughts came across. Contrasting it with Callan, who when they were children, one day he just stopped coming and meeting her, and he just disappeared from her life, and she never saw him again. But she did hear about him years later because he became a famous composer. So he composed movie scores, and she was the one who introduced him to music, so they always have that connection. They end up by meeting in Paris. She's a waitress. She graduated in, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget what she graduated in. Her degree is in French, but her focus, she's kind of curated a reputation of being very good with more ancient translations from French, and so she wants to work in like a historical kind of setting where she translates ancient texts and stuff like that. So she's in Paris and she's kind of stuck in a rut. She's only had like internships, only like not full-time jobs, and she's really looking for something that's going to like actually turn her passion into a career. She finally quits her job at the restaurant, where she does run into Callan, and he is just this playboy. Honestly, his attitude stinks. I did not enjoy him as a hero at all because he was self-destructive. He obviously has issues with his self-worth stemming from his relationship with his father, but he kind of perpetuates it now that he's an adult, and he doesn't think that he deserves any of the fame and the acclaim. And I do love that Mia Sheridan always includes these very interesting storylines, especially for her heroes. They're usually her heroes. So in Archer's Voice, he was mute. He wasn't actually mute. He's able to speak, but he went through a trauma, and he knows some sign language, and his vocal cords are damaged, so he doesn't want to speak. And he was a recluse, and that's kind of part of his character development, is the heroine kind of pulling him all out of that. And Savaged, it was this man who from a very young age raised himself in the wild, and his exposure to society was very limited. So a lot of our heroes go through something like this, and for Callan, he is illiterate. He has dyslexia, he has some learning disabilities, and his father was a horrible man who berated him for it, did not get him help. Well, tried to get him help, but berated him for being stupid for needing help. And so Callan just never thought, even as an adult, even being successful, thought that he could learn. And so he thinks of himself in a very negative way. And so he punishes himself in a way, and he is a playboy, but he sleeps around. He has no compulsion about sleeping with married women. He's actually sleeping with his agent's wife. And he's just very self-destructive, but in a very gross way. I don't like it. I don't like the way that he treats women. I don't like the way that he treats Jessica whenever he meets her again. He meets her at a Parisian restaurant, doesn't recognize her, but she recognizes him, and he ends up by like kissing her, and it's supposed to enforce this connection that they have, but I'm just like, you're with another woman. The wife of the agent is also sitting at the table, and then you're making out with Jessica in a bathroom at a Parisian restaurant. It's just pretty gross. They end up by meeting again a couple weeks later. She takes on this job where they find some ancient texts, and they believe that the woman who wrote these texts knew Joan of Arc. And so there's a really cool kind of like sideline story playing out with the woman who's writing the text, because she kind of has a romance with like a soldier. It's very fun. I enjoyed that kind of more than I enjoyed Callan and Jessica. And of course, Callan lashes out at Jessica whenever she tries to help him. The conflict was kind of annoying because it made me think less of Jessica as well. Again, is her naivety coming into play, and I'm just like, I didn't want to be this mean, but I was kind of like, how can you be this stupid? She had ample opportunity to not try to fix it per se, because it still would have gone on. I'm being very vague because I don't want to spoil it, but she had an opportunity to lessen the blow of this third act conflict, and she didn't. But I really do like kind of like the grand gesture scene at the end. I don't know. I enjoyed it, but not that much. I would pretty much rate it 3.5 stars. Next, I grabbed Filthy by Serena Ackroyd, and this is my first Serena Ackroyd that I've read. I have a bunch of hers on list of things to read, and this one is the first book in her 5 Points mob. So it's like an Irish mob, but it's different than any other mafia romance that I've read. The heroine, Aoife, owns this, it's not a bakery, it's like this little tea shop, and this was like her mom's dream. And she's in the middle of a section of land where the local mob, the 5 Points mob, is trying to pick up all of these small businesses so that they can knock it down to the ground and raise skyscrapers and everything. So she's been fighting against this for a while now. And Finn is a part of this family, basically the head of the family. He's actually kind of like an adopted son of the head of this mob family group. Aiden Sr. is kind of a little bit crazy, a little bit unhinged, and I actually was like I didn't know what to think of the head of this mob, this crime family. I didn't know what to think of Aiden Sr. because he seemed so unhinged, and I was just like, he's gonna go batshit crazy. But his character development was very interesting, and he has a lot of sons. And the reason why Finn was taken in when he was a young boy, and I'll get into his backstory just a little bit, because Finn was friends with Aiden Jr., the eldest of Aiden Sr.'s sons. So he's grown up with them, and now he's become like the money man of the 5 Points mob. And so he approaches Aoife, and he has been staking out her tea shop, and he's very attracted to her, and he's like, I'm gonna blackmail her into being with me. And this is how mafia romance goes. And she doesn't really fight it that hard because she knew Finn whenever she was a child. He does not recognize her because she was like a 2-year-old toddler. So, I mean, it's very hard to recognize somebody that you knew as a legit baby. But she definitely knows who he is, and she's very shocked because she thought that Finn was dead. Her mother was friends with Finn's mother, and Finn's mother, after losing her husband and her son Finn, nobody really knew what happened to them. She was very depressed, and she basically lived with Aoife and Aoife's mom. So Aoife's a little bit shocked. Finn is in her tea shop. He is extremely attractive, and he's zeroed in on her. And he basically says, like, I'll still pay you for this building. You know that I don't have to. Now you know that I'm associated with the 5 Points mob. The worst men will come here and take this building from you, but I'm offering to still give you a very good price for this building. But the other part of it is I want you, and so you have to come with me. And so she's kind of in shock, and she goes with him. And this is the start of their romance. And let me just tell you, Aoife is a virgin heroine. And I feel like the first sex scene and all the sex scenes after this, but especially the first one, it's like, this is what erotica wants to be. It was hot, it was emotional, it was sexy, it was dirty, it was just amazing. I loved it. Some things start happening because, of course, the Irish mob and the Russian mob and the, I think it was Colombians, I can't really remember. But they're all kind of like at each other's throats, and there's retaliations and all kind of like those types of conflicts that you expect to find in a mafia romance and a mob romance. And some parts were a little bit slow, but I, for the most part, really enjoyed this, and I cannot wait to start the second one. But I'm going to wait to read the second one because I think I just want it on my Kindle during the Kindle Clear Out Readathon, just in case I get in a book slump and I need to read something that I know that I really want to read. So I'm just kind of like saving that. That's how my brain works. I give this book 4.5 stars. I can't wait to see what happens with this family. I'm very, very, very intrigued. Then I listened to Tempus by Beverly Jenkins. This was the Patreon pick for our February exclusive. I listened to this on audio, and it might be my favorite Beverly Jenkins that I've read so far. So this is the third book in her Old West series. I haven't read the other two, and I don't know what it is about it. I'm just never really drawn to Western historical romances, but the ones that I've read I really like, so I don't know what that means. I don't know why. I just don't gravitate towards them, but when I read them I like them. So maybe I just need to read more Western romances. The heroine in this book, and I realized this pretty quickly, that Beverly Jenkins writes some really badass heroines, and I really liked Regan. She is very self-assured. She is a mail order bride. So she is from Arkansas? She's from Arkansas, and she has been corresponding with this doctor in Oklahoma, and his name is Dr. Colton Lee, and she agrees to go over there to go marry him. Now, Colton is a widower, and he's a single dad, and he has this wonderful little daughter, and I absolutely loved her character so much. Anna was a gem. I freaking loved her. Their first meeting was probably one of my favorite scenes, Regan and Colton. So she is traveling in a wagon. Someone's delivering her to Dr. Colton, and they're set upon by like some bandits, you know, highwaymen kind of type beings, and Reagan's just like a sure shot. She has her Winchester, and she is just like, heck no. And so she shoots these guys, the wagon's like running, and then they have like some more men coming after them, and so she shoots at them as well. And then the person who's driving her is laughing hysterically, being like, oh my god, you just shot at Doc Lee, and also the sheriff. And so this is her first meeting with her future husband. She actually shot him in the arm, and it's kind of funny. So Lee is just kind of like, oh my god, what kind of bride did I order? Because his first wife was very like docile and meek and just nothing like Regan is. And so he's kind of unsure whether or not he wants to marry her or not. But his younger sister, Spring, who I think she is the second book in the Women Who Dare series. I think Spring's the second book, so after Rebel. The way that these series intertwine is very strange to keep like track of like these series hopping characters, because Spring is a character we meet in the Old West series, but her book is the second book in the Women Who Dare series. So Spring takes an immediate liking to Regan, and Regan also comes from a pretty wealthy family. And the plot of this book was not very romance heavy, and I think that that's the part that I was missing. But I had a ton of fun while reading this book. So it's very like a strange thing to say that this was one of my favorite Beverly Jenkins book, but I felt like the romance was a little lacking. The reason why the romance was a little lacking is because they do end up by getting married, but it goes quickly from like, we're strangers, to I feel like I've been married to you for 12 years, just super comfortable. I was missing some of that passion that I needed from them to see that they were like truly in love with each other. I think that they were a very good match, and I loved what Regan like brought out in Doc Lee, and also her relationship with the little girl. Oh my god, she took to being like the most amazing stepmother. Like it was amazing to witness, because there's like this villainous character named Aunt Minnie, and she's kind of been looking after Anna, and she was also the aunt of Doc Lee's wife that passed away. She's a horrible person. I feel like she just like thrives off of other people's pain. She loves to berate people. It sounded like she was like that with Colton's first wife, and she's like this with Anna. She always is just like fussing at her, like, you are supposed to like say yes ma'am, no ma'am, and like, you can't eat cake, you can't do this, you can't do that. And she's just like a very fearful little girl when Regan meets her. But as soon as Regan was like taking charge of Anna and like, you're a child, let me show you how to do fun childish things, I want to see you smile and stuff like that. And it was just like so good. It was so good. So anyway, I enjoyed this story, wanted a little bit more romance, but I still give this book 4 stars. I really did like it. Then we get to the book that I DNF'd, The Architect by Nikki Sloan. This is the third book in her Nashville Neighborhood series. I really love the first one, which is The Doctor. It's a huge age gap romance, and also like, I'm falling in love with my boyfriend's father. So very taboo. Really enjoyed it. Very much loved it. Then we have The Pool Boy, which I recently read, and it was an older woman, younger man, and also it's like she was best friends with his mom. So lots of taboo elements going on. And I just purchased The Architect without reading the synopsis because I was just like, I love this Nashville neighborhood series. I love the tabooness of it. There's probably going to be another age gap, and like, yes, I love it. And I should have read the synopsis because I probably wouldn't have picked it up. Or if I would have, I might have picked it up. I'm not saying no. But it had such a different feel. From the very first scene, I was just kind of like, what is going on? This feels like such a weird setup. Like I feel like I'm in like the Twilight Zone, because we're in the point of view of the heroine, Lilith, and she is living in her parents' like pool house outdoor. It's basically like a mini house in their backyard. It's a very wealthy neighborhood, and her parents like to travel a lot, and so she watches like the main house. And she doesn't really know the neighbor that well, but he comes to knock on her door one night. It's like raining, storming, whatever. And he just kind of like, hey, you're a vet, right? She's like, no, I'm a vet tech. And he's like, well, I think a cat tried to get in my house and I think I slammed the door on its tail. Like, come over. And it was just like such a weird situation. Like, I don't know. So she goes there, they're searching for the cat, and she's like admiring how hot he is, and he's very standoffish, and Clay is a very hard character to get to know, and I really wasn't interested in him at all. We quickly find out because somehow Lilith, who has no relationship with Clay before this incident, this really random incident, convinces him like, hey, I'm gonna watch your house and you're gonna keep this cat, like, and then it's our cat, like we're gonna share this cat, and he's gonna live with you because I think one of her parents is allergic to cats, or both of them. I don't remember, because I was just like, this is bizarre. He's like, okay, I'm going to Florida, watch my house. Here's a key to my house, random stranger. So she goes in, and they're kind of like flirty. Not really flirty, because Clay really doesn't flirt. He's so closed off and stoic. She goes into his basement where he told her not to go, and she finds out that he crafts furniture for like BDSM play. Like St. Andrew's crosses and like spanking tables and all that jazz. I'm not super into the more, how do you say this? Like the more intense elements of BDSM. That's not my thing. I don't really love to read about it in romance. It just doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't excite me, doesn't interest me or intrigue me, not that much. I don't mind like a dominant and submissive just kind of like dynamic between the hero and heroine, and I don't mind kinky bed play at all, but like the whole like St. Andrew's crosses and whipping and all ball and chain gags, all that just doesn't, it's not my thing. It's just not. So I was already not interested in the characters, and then this element comes into play. He takes her to a club, a sex club, and it's just, I don't know, none of it was really doing it for me. I didn't really feel a connection with the characters, and then all of a sudden she's trusting him to bring her into this BDSM world. And then enters another man. So Clay hasn't been with Lilith at all throughout this novel, and I only read up to 30%, so this is all the information that I have, up to 30%. And Lilith have not had sex. And we find out it's because he had a bad experience with a past submissive, which is kind of reminiscent of 50 Shades of Grey. Hate to say it, but it is. And so they go to the sex club, and he allows somebody else to fuck her. And I'm just like, what is this? So apparently this book is an MFM romance, and I wasn't expecting it. And I think since I was already 30% in and I didn't really care for the relationship with Clay and Lilith, that's why I was just kind of like, well, this is not even fun for me, because all of a sudden this other dude is coming into play and I don't even care for you two together. So I decided to DNF this book. I don't know if I'll go back and ever finish it. It just doesn't seem to be my favorite Nikki Sloan that I've read, so I might not ever go back and try to finish this book. So it's a DNF for now. Then I read an arc for The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Danan. As you can see from my smile, I enjoyed this 1,000 times more than I enjoyed The Roommate. I didn't really enjoy The Roommate. It lacked a lot of things that I was looking for and expecting, and this book delivered everything that I was missing in the first book. It was phenomenal. 5+ stars. I enjoyed this book so very much. I was already intrigued by Naomi's character from The Roommate. If you haven't read The Roommate before, it's about a porn star, and he becomes the roommate of this girl who moved cross country to be with her childhood crush. The childhood crush is like peace out. I'm going to tour with my band. Here's a random roommate for you. And their romance plays out. We meet Naomi, who is the ex of the hero in the first one, Josh's ex, and she was also a porn star. But now it's like a couple years later, their brand has really taken off, Shameless, which is like putting empowering content out there for people looking to be comfortable with their bodies, be comfortable with their sexuality and their desires and all that. And Naomi is like a badass boss woman, okay? She is amazing. She's going to these conferences because she wants to be out there promoting her brand, and she really likes being like a teacher. She wants to instruct people. But since she is a former porn star, she's an entertainer, nobody really wants to touch her with a 10-foot pole, so she's struggling with this until she's approached by the most unlikely person ever at this convention. So this hot guy comes sit next to her and like, hey, I think I might have like a job for you. How would you feel about heading up this series on intimacy? And she was like, okay, where would this be? And he was like, well, I'm a rabbi at this Jewish reform, and forgive me if I'm saying this wrong because I'm not super familiar with Judaism and the different intricacies of the types of Judaism. So, but I do know that Ethan is the rabbi for Reform Judaism. Naomi's like, no, I'm not. Naomi grew up and she was Jewish, but she hasn't been practicing, and her parents weren't even like big on practicing either. And so she's just kind of like, this is something that I don't want to really confront. And he's like, okay, well, here's my card if you like change your mind. And she ends up by doing this series on intimacy, exploring like dating, and just like so many wonderful things happen in this book. And the romance between Naomi and Ethan, because she's just like, I'm always attracted to people I shouldn't want or I can't have. And like, this can't be happening again. And Ethan is extremely attracted to Naomi, and he is not deterred at all by her former profession. He never makes her feel bad for it. And I think that's why I heart this so much, is because Ethan is the most amazing hero ever. I freaking love him. I can't say enough about them. It's beautiful. I love them. Naomi is a badass character. I love her as a heroine. Ethan is amazing. I love them as a couple. They fit well, so well together. And yeah, I feel like I've been waving my hands around this whole time. I'm really excited about this book. This book was really good, and I hope that everybody reads it. And I'm so glad that I decided to read The Intimacy Experiment, even though I didn't like the roommate, so yay. Next, I reread A Kingdom of Dreams by Judith McNaught for the podcast, and I really love medieval romance. I don't know what it is about medieval romance that I really enjoy, and I really love Jessica, who is the heroine of this book. She's 17, and she's been in like a nunnery for 2 years. She's not a nun. She is the daughter of a very powerful Scottish nobleman, and he is not a fan of hers, but she wants her father's love so badly. So she's very loyal to Scotland and her father, and the Scottish and the English are at war with each other, and there is this English kind of like warlord. He is the Earl of Claymore, and he has this reputation of being kind of like the boogeyman to the Scottish. Like, the Scottish people tell their children like bad stories about the wolf. The wolf was going to come get them if they don't behave, and he is our hero. Jessica gets, did I say her name was Jessica or Jennifer? Her name's Jennifer. But Jennifer gets kidnapped along with her sister Brenna, her stepsister Brenna. And her father has a much better relationship with all of her step-siblings. She is only close with Brenna and William, and Malcolm and Alexander, who had died in one of the previous skirmishes with the wolf, was horrible and kind of turned all of her like village against Jennifer, which Jennifer wants to be loved so bad, and this was just terrible, a terrible thing to happen to her. So in the beginning, for the first 80% of this book, Jennifer is such a fierce character. The shenanigans that she puts Royce through, who definitely underestimates her, and just be like, oh, it's just a girl, it's just a little girl, a little nun, nothing, yeah, they won't outwit us. And she escapes multiple times and just like keeps him on his toes. And I really, really, really enjoyed this book a lot, except for the ending conflict, which is why I only rated this book 4 stars, because I feel like I was very frustrated with Jennifer and her continued loyalty to her father, who we all know as the reader that he's heinous and like he does not deserve her loyalty or love. And I understand why she needs that, but the fact that once her and Royce do establish a relationship and she meets his people and she bonds with them, and she still gives her loyalty to her father. I'm just like, no. But anyway, I still enjoyed the reread. And lastly, I read Deliver by Pam Godwin. This is a dark romance with some very dark themes like sex trafficking and rape and just like torture. It's very hard. It's not for the faint of heart. It has some very graphic scenes in it. But wow, did this book blow me away. The romance, it's like, this is why I read dark romance. I'm like, how are you going to convince me that this relationship is a relationship that I believe? I believe that these characters love each other. I believe that these characters are redeemable in a way. And Pam Godwin, wow, I wasn't expecting anything that happened in this book. The heroine Liv, we meet her and she's scouting out her next slave, her victim. She calls herself the Deliverer. She and her male counterpart, Van, they have an interesting relationship, but they're scouting out the next victim. They all have very specific requirements from their buyers. And so this next buyer wants a male and also a virgin male who's like never been with a woman. And so she scouts out this guy named Joshua Carter, and he plays for Baylor. And she's like, yeah, this is him. So she kidnaps him, lures him in, kidnaps him, and imprisons him. And this is a romance between Liv and Joshua. And it works. It's so freaking good. Oh, and he's also very devout. He is going to Baylor to be a minister. So, wow. He is trying to convince her that she's wrong. Like, let me help you. Obviously, you don't want to be in this situation, do you? And she's just like, you're making my job harder. And it was just a very interesting romance. I can't really explain anything without spoiling stuff, very important details for the plot. So you just have to read it. If you're into dark romance, this one's definitely amazing. I'm currently reading the second book right now, and I wasn't expecting this at all either. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. I feel, yeah. She does it. She does the work. Audiobooks are really good. Except for, I didn't really care for the female narrator for Deliver. It's different for the second book. But the female narrator, I just didn't really care for her. Also, these characters are from Austin, and Austonians don't have a twangy accent. They have more of like a city accent, and she was twanging it up for Josh, both Josh's character and Liv's character. But the male narrator, when he was speaking and he was saying their dialogue, he didn't have a twang for them. So it's just kind of like off-putting that she has like the twangy accent when they talk, but he does not. That's my one critique of the audiobook, but the narrators for the second book, top notch, love them. It's amazing. All right, guys, that wraps up this week's, the last week in February's weekly wrap up, and I will be doing a whole wrap up of February as a whole, and I have some stats that I'm keeping track of, so it's going to be very interesting comparing it to January, and I'm so excited to see what March has in store for me. I already have a ton of amazing books that I have in my TBR, my regular TBR, and then soon I'm putting out my TBR for the Kindle Clear Out Readathon, so be on the lookout for that video. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you subscribe to get notified at any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye, guys.